Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the program. It's been a long week. We missed you. Before we get into our conversation with Representative Ilhan Omar, I want to pose a rhetorical question for you, which is, are we on the brink of revolution in this country? Let's use as a benchmark for that the conservative sociologist and professor Robert Nisbet, who passed away in 1996, was at, I believe, the University of California at Berkeley. He laid down what he considered the 10 preconditions for revolution. A friend of mine sent it to me just before, not long before we started recording this program, and I got to thinking about it, and I thought I'd run those thoughts by you. Now, I don't think any of us would agree with all 10 descriptors or conditions Professor Nesbitt puts on his description of the preconditions for revolution and that genuine revolution. He leaned very heavily on conservative thinkers that went before him, specifically Edmund Burke. But let's think about it for a second, because it's good food for thought. And while we're getting ready to pivot to someone who's a member of the squad, and I'm going to talk more about the different feelings around changing within the political system and the Democratic Party later in the show. But if not that, are we ready for a revolution? Well, let's see what Nisbet has to say. First of all, he says a real revolution must follow, and I'm paraphrasing from the imaginative conservative website. If that seems like an oxymoron, shame on you for being judgmental. But first, real revolution should come after, or must come after, some kind of dramatic change in society, either the economic or social order. And while it has to be a big change, a dramatic change, it's something that may have happened so gradually that people didn't even realize it was happening, like the canary or whatever it is, that thing about gradually turning up the water on shrimp. I don't know. Anyway, I would argue that we have been through a drastic change. We've never had a truly egalitarian society, economically or socially, but I would argue that at least economically, inequality has soared to unsustainable levels. In addition, of course, we have the destabilizing effect of climate change, which will only get worse. Second, Nesbitt talks about a breakdown of authority. I would argue that a lack of respect for authority has now become endemic on the left and the right, and the center is clinging desperately to a sense of respect for a system that is quickly losing all objective claims to rationality and authority. I've talked about that a lot elsewhere. I won't go into that here. Now, Nisbet says society must have become relatively recently wealthy, or wealthier than it has been. I think he's speaking from his experience living through the student uprisings of the 1960s. I don't think it's any way necessary for that to be a precondition of revolution. He also says societies should have been liberalized enough recently that people can see what they're still missing. And I would argue that the internet has in fact done that, has given people a glimpse of what life might be like, what life is like for those that are better off than themselves, and may have created a kind of pre-revolutionary state. Fifth, says Nesbitt, society must have become intensely politicized. Well, I don't even think I have to make my case there. Sixth, the intellectual elites, having accepted the politicization of society, must see the opportunities a politicized and centralized power structure presents to them, and they must eagerly seize it. I think that's been going on a while. Then there needs to be a catalyst, precipitating event. We haven't seen that yet. Revolutions, while they will never attract the mass of people, says Nesbitt, the conservative must be able to mobilize morally a small cadre of crusaders to mock the norms of a society, says the imaginative conservative. Now, I don't know about mocking the norms of a society. I know that people on both the left and the right are hostile to the norms of society, at least as they extend to the political process. I think there's validity to that, although its expression on the right is atrocious and frightening. Revolutionaries must paint, he says, as his ninth precondition, an idyllic picture of the future, that the future must look enormously bright. I don't think anybody yet has figured out how to paint that picture, but I would argue that it can be painted and that it is extremely possible to imagine a future that is much brighter than the present we're living in today. 10th, this is an interesting observation on Nisbet's part. He's paraphrased here, there must already exist a certain amount of guilt within and among members of the ruling class. This must be something that is at least tangentially obvious and exploitable by those who will be revolting. Now, I don't think he means that in terms of repulsive, although he may have felt that way also. But now again, here Nisbet, I would argue, is speaking out of his experiences of the 1960s when the ruling classes, many segments of them embraced the social changes going on the left and among the young. So are we with all this in mind, by Robert Nisbet's standards, are we in a pre-revolutionary state or not? I guess I would have to say no, comma, but, dot, dot, dot. And the but conditions are these. We are definitely in a state where we've had a drastic change in economic inequality. People are extremely aware of this. We've had a drastic change in the ability of executives and the wealthy to escape legal consequences for their actions. I think people are extremely aware of this across the political spectrum as well. We have had a series of catastrophic events around climate change, which, as much as the right tries to deny the connection between those events of extreme weather and so on, fires, etc., and climate change, I think most people, even a lot of people on the right, are coming around to understanding that our planet is changing and changing drastically. I think that within a short period of time, that will become so extreme and obvious, as will inequality, that pre-revolutionary conditions will certainly be met along these lines. And of course, we know society is already politicized. Liberalization, I'm not that concerned with. Now, that means a pre-revolutionary state obviously can cut one of two ways, right? It can be a revolution for the better. It can be a revolution for the worst. It can be a right-wing uprising leading to a dictator of terrifying nature, much more so than any we've seen in this country up to date. And that is certainly a possibility. I would argue then that unless things start to improve dramatically, which I don't see in the near future, it is incumbent on us who have a bright vision of the future to start to articulate that future, to lay out a world that is considerably better than the world we see today, and also to lay out a course of revolutionary change that is neither violent nor antithetical to the best qualities of the human spirit. I think we're up to it. I think we can do it, and I think it's our responsibility to keep working on it. That's one of the reasons I have this program, The Zero Hour. You can find out more about us at thisisthezerohour.com, but we're all in this together, so it's on all of us to envision that better world together.